Welcome back, baseball fans. 1981-84 Fall League Draft, token round of the draft. We have just started the process, so we're going to show you how it starts. Then we'll pause and give you the results at the end after a break. So the draft has concluded with 256 selections, though it doesn't mean 256 new players are added to our league of 384 players, because we have separate considerations to use undrafted free agency for. The first of which is the players who were improved into a new year, and this is the list. It's a smaller list than in previous years. Normally it was like 30 players. This list is only about 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, only 18. That's a pretty good sign. It means that the league feels that we don't need to improve the players we presently have into a different year. Most of the time, it's when a guy just gets started and then 2 or 3 years later, boom, he flashes. And that, of course, are guys like on this list. It's Tony Gwynn. I think we have Ryan Sandberg on this list. Guys who got into the league earlier, but it took them 2 or 3 years to really dominate. So with that, we have here, we've indicated the year that he went into. So he goes into his 81 card. So Cincinnati needs to replace this card that's vacant on the roster, which is the 82 year player 03. And so that's what the teams will need to address in undrafted free agency. It means the Reds have 19 players. In the case of Pittsburgh, they have 1, 2, 3. They only have 17 players. They have to add 3 to their roster because they improved Bob Baylor, Don Slaught, and Johnny Ray. And in addition to replacing these guys, teams can swap players from different years. We mentioned that previously up top, that the Cardinals are going to move Bruce Hurst out of 82, put him in 84, and put Les Cano from 84 into 82. We also mentioned that the Phillies, they're going to move Onyx Concepcion out of 82, put him in 84, move Harry Spillman out of 84, put him in 82. When teams acquire guys in these different years, it's because they just want the player on the roster so they don't lose out on him. Once they are their property, then they can move them into a different year. We have the case of Houston, which has 3 lefty relievers and no lefty starters, so they have to figure out what to do with Dan Boone, Joe Sambito, and Frank DePeno. Now that's what they're going to have to figure out in this draft. And lastly, a team can just look at their overall roster, make trades, or simply look at a particular player that they don't like anymore and replace him. So that all happens in the undrafted token portion of the draft. Every time a team is up, they have an option to make a move. If they decide they're going to pass, once they pass, they can't get back into the league. It means that they're ready for opening day. So with that, these are the players we know are going to be carrying on. And this is undrafted free agency's token round draft order. So you factor in your tokens. So we start the draft with the draft order here. The Cardinals with the first pick, world champion Ohio players 32nd pick. All right, but every team started with exactly 5 tokens. But there have been pluses and minuses as teams are balancing trades and trading keeper players and so forth. So every time a token is used as currency in a move, it's reflected in the overall token count. And that's the overall token count is the draft order. Seattle has a staggering 8 tokens. They have the most money, you could say, of any team in the draft. They have the first pick in the token round. They have the second pick in the token round. They have the 5th pick in the token round. And they have the 16th pick. So it's an opportunity to really make their team better if they choose. The moment they've run out of options, they simply would have to pass. You saw the Cardinals. They have the first pick in the overall draft, which is in this number here. But it's only the 15th overall pick in the token round because all the teams with money move past them. Seattle, the Giants, Cleveland, Seattle, the Dodgers, etc. So this is where a team that stayed at 5 tokens, Cardinals, that's where they would go. Even when the draft order, and this obviously starts to repeat all the way down, we go the 8s, the 7s, the 6s, the 5s, the 4s, the 3s, the 2s, the 1s, and the 0s, until we get to 0. And the reason we go all the way down to 0 is because there's going to be a team in here or two that don't have any money. So these are the bankrupt teams. And in the case of Detroit, they only have 1 token left in the draft. So they get choice numbers 192, 191, 188, and 180. And then the regular pick 161, should they choose to use it. And they're just signing the whatever is left on the street at that point. By this point of undrafted free agency, we expect most of the teams to pass. So with that, we're going to pause it, and we're going to begin undrafted free agency, which will finalize the rosters for the draft. So stay tuned and see how those results go. All right, we're back with the token round of the draft has been completed. We'll scroll back down to that. This is the scrolling up to the 256 players who are drafted. Then after that, we got to fill in the missing pieces of players that were improved, plus any other additional changes teams want to make. So once you get down to the bottom, the 256, that's where we create a space. First thing we do is we copy the players. Let's begin with the first one, Dave Concepcion. We had his 82 card, and for him, we actually went back a year to the 81 card where he hits 306. These are actually the stats of the active card we're taking. 306, 358, 767 OPS. Great year for Concepcion, 81. That means that they're going to have to add an 82 card to replace the card he used to occupy on the roster. And so this is the list of all of those players. It's a total of 18 players here. The first number here indicates that Concepcion's continuing with the 81 card, and the slash is we need a new 8203 card. The third card from the year of 1982 is gone. Now we have to add one. And then that's the same case for all these. And so we also have, we just want a place to copy records of baseball players who are either being waived or possibly being improved to a different year, just a holding area. And that's what this area is right here, just a temporary holding area as we wait the final destination. I mean, you could say it's like the guys are at the airport and they don't know where the flight's going to be taken off or not, or if there's going to be a layover. So they're just waiting to see where they go. So this is the token round of the draft. The Seattle are the kings of the token round. When we look at the overall draft order, St. Louis first, Seattle 2. But when it comes to tokens, the token number goes first, of course. So Seattle's 8. Seattle will go with their 8th, and then the teams who have 7, the teams who have 6, and the teams who have 5. So with that, let's begin. The first pick by Seattle is actually a trade involving a token. Because they had so many, Detroit had so few. We'll go look again at the token list. Here's the Tigers. They made all sorts of moves for players. They added Willie Hernandez, Jerry Koosman. They got somebody off the Phillies as well. Oh, Tug McGraw they would get. We'll see that coming up. Or that might have been in the draft portion we've already seen. But in any event, Seattle trades a token to Detroit with Jackson Todd for Tom Brennan. And Brennan is the player Seattle wants as a starter 8 on a team that needs a lot of help. And Detroit has an extremely deep bullpen, so Jackson Todd being a starter 6 doesn't hold them down. Matter of fact, Jackson Todd played for the Ohio Players in the World Series a year ago. So it's a downgrade for Detroit in the 4th spot of the pitching staff behind Morris, Wilcox, and Koosman, but they have plenty of bullpen to make up for it, and they get a token. Next team up, well, Seattle again. After getting Tom Brennan in that deal, the next move they did was that they swapped out Tony Bernazard's card from a 256 card he had. They swapped it into his 81 card where it's 276. Actually, he played for the White Sox that year. He would later get traded to Seattle. But Bernazard is the pick for Seattle there to be their second baseman. And the funny part about it is Seattle's future second baseman, Jack Bracani, ends up with the White Sox instead of Julio Cruz. So it's been a big merry-go-round at second base between the two franchises. All right, next up, the Giants with their 7th token, and this is just hilarious, folks. They needed to add a pitcher. Way up here, if you want to look at the reason for these ads, San Francisco had Fred Brenning put into his 83 card so he can pitch on 3 days of rest, so they needed an 8107. So with their 8107 here in the year 81, 42-year-old Gaylord Perry returns to San Francisco. Oh my, isn't that a fun story there? So yeah, of course, great late 60s Gaylord Perry in San Francisco, and now he returns 13, 14 years later. How cool is that? Next up with a 7th token is Cleveland, and check out the Indians. They are the first team to pass, and they do it with 2 extra tokens in their pocket. So they collected money, and then they looked at their roster, and they said, we're good. Hey, you can't make this team any better than this. So they didn't go out and buy any more talent or swap out cards for different years. They feel it. They are ready to go. They've had a great draft. That's a tough division. The last 2 World Series champions, the Expos, Ohio Players, and then the Tigers are going to be a team that wants to win the division and World Series in '84. But here's Cleveland, content to pass. Next up, it's Seattle again. Now we're down to the 6s. This is how you can control undrafted free agency if you're Seattle. You've added Tom Brennan, you've improved Tony Bernazard, and now you're going to add Marshall Edwards. They needed a corner outfielder, and he gives you good defense. He can even play center field. He's 30 years old, late bloomer, but Marshall Edwards hits 297, and so very productive 297. He'll go in the corners for the Mariners. Next up, the Dodgers. All right, the Dodgers, where did they have to go here? They needed an 81 guy, I believe, or no. The Dodgers actually decided, they had their 20 players, but they decided they wanted to cut. And the way you do it is you look at the number down here, 8106, and you look here. They had Billy Smith as their shortstop a year ago because he was a switch hitter, and they wanted the extra left-handed bat. Now they don't care about the extra left-handed bat. They want better defense at shortstop. So Mario Mendoza, his second best year after 1980, is a 2. He's a 2 shortstop. It's 231, but he's lefties reasonably well. Most importantly, he's a 2 shortstop. And so that's why the Dodgers went out and got him. Next up with 6 tokens, the Twins. And they pass. Minnesota passes. Next up, the Padres with their 6th token. They had to add a few players up here, I believe. For a couple of guys, they improved. We know they improved Tony Gwynn to get him in his 84 card. And let's see, they also improved Joe LaFay. And that's the pick of 81. to get Joe LaFay, the 8104 Joe LaFay used to have. They, in adding Marshall Edwards, Seattle let go Bill Fahey, a left-hand hitting catcher. And this is what happens based on the order. Suddenly, when you add a guy and you have to release a guy, sometimes that guy you release, another team wants him. San Diego wanted a left-hand hitting catcher. Seattle just put a left-handed hitting catcher on waivers, and San Diego went out and got him. Bill Fahey did play for the Padres in 1980. Left-handed bat, played for the Tigers in 81. And pretty reasonable in a platoon. Next up, the Expos. The Expos needed to add a 8105. Yes, they used to have Bill Sample in that spot, but they improved Bill Sample to make him a Double-A Steeler. So for the 81 spot he occupied, they added Dave Schmidt to the bullpen, and not only to the bullpen by committee. There's some new faces there in the bullpen. They added Chris Welsh and Dave Schmidt. Rudy May goes into the rotation for the Expos. All right, next up, Atlanta. Atlanta had a Brenly. Bob Brenly is one of their catchers. They needed a second one. They need to take the spot Enos Cabell got improved into. So with Cabell leaves the year of 81. Sadik enters as a catcher who hits righties better than lefties to platoon with Bob Brenly. Funny thing is, both those guys played for the Giants at various points in the timeline. Now they're both here in Atlanta. All right, next up, the Giants. So we saw them take Gaylord Perry earlier, and that's all they needed to do. They've had a heck of a draft. The Giants are heading home. Next up, the Yankees with 6 tokens. Who would have thought the Yankees actually bartered and gained money instead of losing money? And they pass. You know, adding Don Mattingly to the team, and certainly had a lot to do with this team. They're sitting pat with the team they had last year, and they felt that they got better by adding Don Mattingly to it. So, Yankees pass. And then Cleveland's 6 token. Now, of course, once you pass, you're out all for it. You don't get to get back in. So every time you see Cleveland from here on out, it'll be a pass. Next up, Portland. They pass with 6 tokens as well. Next up, we have the Red Sox. They decided that they had 2 players who would be better if they flipped years. Bruce Hurst is 1982. Get him out of there, get him into his 84 card. And Lezcano has a nice 84 card, but frankly, his 82 card is pretty good as well. So those 2 guys flip mostly to help Hurst. So the first of those moves is listed here for the Cardinals, and that is to get Bruce Hurst into his 84 card. Next up, our friends the Seattle Mariners. They've been busy, but they finally said, okay, we're done. They tapped out. They made 1, 2, 3 moves before 3 of the first 9 moves in the draft were done by Seattle. So they finally decide we've done enough. We're good. We're ready to play. All right, Dodgers up again. And interesting that the Dodgers would start twiddling the knobs on their team a bit, adding a defensive shortstop. I think they've been watching the moves the Giants, Astros, and Padres have made. That National League West is going to be the toughest division. So they decided that they had Davey Lopes in his 83 card, but they decided to get him out of it and get Dave Stewart into it. Stewart moves from his 81 card to this 83 short performance in Texas with a 2.14 ERA and the whip of 113. Of course, his innings pitches is low, but they have great pitching. The Dodgers over the past many drafts, they have lost Jerry Royce to Portland. They lost Fernando to Arizona. They lost Bob Welch to Arizona, and they've just lost Don Sutton to Houston this offseason. But they put together another great pitching staff now with Bert Hooton, Oral Hershiser, Dave Stewart in his best year, and Rick Honeycutt in one of his best years of 1981. So they were able to get close, if not match, their starting rotation of years past. So good news for the Dodgers. All right, Boston. They have not made any moves or tokens, and they're just passed to the Red Sox. And we're like, oh, we don't need to do anything. We're good. And then the Twins, we saw them pass earlier, so now you're going to see another pass. Every time you see Minnesota, it'll be a pass. The Mets' first move here, 8108. Yes, okay. So they had Frank Tanana in that spot. They decided to improve him to his 84 card, where he can pitch on 3 days rest. That opened the door for the Mets. This is so... I tell you, these old players, we saw Bobby Mercer going back to the Giants. We saw Gaylord Perry going back to the Giants. 37-year-old Rusty Staub goes back to the Mets. Hits .317 his final year, or one of his, I guess it wasn't his final year, but he hits .317. Did it with the New York Mets in 81. So he matches that performance. Boy, the 81 Mets had Joel Youngblood, Hubie Brooks, and Rusty Staub all hitting .317 or higher. Great offense. All right, next up, it's the Pirates. This is a team that needs a drastic facelift. The 70s ended harshly for this team without a title. They got the title in the 71-74 carryover league I played last year, but it didn't end well. They've been holding on to Stargell and Dave Parker for long. Believe it or not, this is the first of 5 player additions you're going to see in the token round of the draft for the Pirates, just to get the roster to fit. They got some misfit pieces. They got some talent, but they don't fit well. 8103 for Pittsburgh. Let's see. It should be up here. We know Johnny Ray. Oh, Bob Baylor. Bob Baylor used to occupy that spot. He went to a different year to improve his offense. So in the 81 spot he vacated, they added Charlie Leibrandt to the bullpen. They needed another lefty on the team. They only had 2. And so now they have 3 with Charlie Leibrandt. .360 ERA in 81. Does put a lot of guys on base. Doesn't give up a lot of extra base hits, though. Decent card for Charlie Leibrandt. Kind of a futures buy as well, as he will get better by the mid-80s. All right, Colorado is on the clock. I think they needed to add a guy for who? Oh, yeah, Greg Pryor. They moved Pryor out of the 81 card into his better 82 card. So in the absence there, in 81, they needed a middle infielder who had some power versus righties, because Colorado likes power. Stan Pappy fit the bill. He only got a .204 hitter, but he's got a homer on 1.5 against righties on his card. Good enough for a middle infielder for a team who thrives on home runs. Texas Rangers on the clock, and they adopted the strategy we saw earlier with the Cardinals and Bruce Hurst and Lescano, flipping them into different years. They're doing the same thing with Mickey Rivers and Dave Henderson. They got Dave Henderson when the year 81 came up, understanding that he only hit 167. So you knew they were going to improve him. The cool part is Mickey Rivers can go back to playing center field with that 81 card. He's a center fielder again. He was in the corners. Now he's a 2 in center field with a .286 average. Next up, the Florida Marlins. Haven't heard from them yet. They pass. This is where we introduce a lot of the teams, because you're supposed to start the draft with 5 tokens. Florida passes. Next up, Baltimore. They needed to add a catcher versus lefties in the year of 81, and it's not a home run. I mean, come on. But it's a heck of a cool pick for them. They get Rick Cerrone, a guy who played for Toronto and New York, 2 of your division rivals. Still -2 arm. He'll platoon with the +2 arm of Joe Nolan. And yeah, it's 244, but that's okay. Yeah, they couldn't get Rick Dempsey was claimed in the draft from Kansas City, so they couldn't bring back one of their catchers. They got a division rivals catcher. All right, next up we have the Padres, and this is the next move they made. They had to make multiple moves. They added Bill Fahey with token 6. With token 5, they needed a platoon second baseman who hits righties better than lefties. And it's not pretty, but it's Brian Giles, who also can field. He's a 2.88 second baseman. He's got power, a lot of homers versus righties. You don't want to play him against lefties. He only hits 210. He'll platoon with Dave Ursello on the Padres. That's probably the only weak spot of that Padre lineup is second base, since they traded away Manny Trio to get Carney Lansford. The Expos, picking 15th, have passed. And then we have Atlanta. They also pass with 5 tokens. Now we have Toronto. This is the first of 2 moves by the Blue Jays. They would add Chris Welsh to their bullpen, 81. 3.78 ERA as a starter. But what you often find is, particularly with lefties, there's usually more left-handed starters than left-handed relievers. And so often we look for starter relief starters to go into bullpens in our league. All right, then we see the Giants passing again, and now you're going to start seeing some repetition. Giants, Yankees, Cleveland here. Yeah, same repetition here. Giants, Yankees, Cleveland, Portland pass at 6. They pass at 5. Which means now we get to hear from the Cincinnati Reds for the first time. Wow, this is a cool move. They needed to add a right-handed starting pitcher, period, who can pitch. He didn't have to pitch on 3 days rest, but the guy they picked certainly did, and that's Bruce Bereni. 9-18 bad record, but he actually pitched pretty well on a bad Cincinnati team in '82. 222 innings, a 3.36 ERA for Bereni. They'll have Soto and Seaver, Joe Price, and Bruce Bereni pitching for the Reds this year. Next up, Oakland. They lost Gene Tennis in a trade in the offseason. They needed to find a catcher who can hit righties, mostly better, a little bit better than lefties. Platooning with Gary Allenson. They found Glenn Brummer. He's got a good on-base percentage, a 276 hitter, 351 on base. No power. It's just singles and walks and a couple doubles. But hits righties better than lefties, so he makes a reasonable platoon with Gary Allenson. All right, next up, Houston. They are going to be busy. They finally are making the first of many moves. They're also adopting a strategy of swapping cards around, and you kind of ask a volunteer. It's like, hey, is there anybody in 1983 who wants to move in 1984? And you ask all your players, and there is one guy. It's Jose Cruz. Hits 312 in 1 year, 318 in the other year. 83 and 84, arguably the best years of his career, and frankly, he gets a 1-year contract extension. Moving from 83 to 84, and we'll find out who moves from 84 to 83 a little bit later. All right, Ohio players. World champs. Just needed to add one player. They needed a infielder that could play second base versus lefties. It ain't pretty, but they found Shooty Babbitt. And I tell you, if a guy's got a really cool name, I'm going to look really hard to try and get him into the league. And Shooty makes it. He is that second baseman that can platoon with Jerry Manuel, who can at left-handed pitching very well. So Shooty Babbitt is in the league for the Ohio players. Next up, it's part 2 of that St. Louis trade. So it's Sixto Lezcano will move into his 82 card, 289, 860 OPS, and not even the best card in the timeline. 84, I think he's with Houston, maybe the Phillies, can't recall. But has a great 1984 and a 1982. Continues throughout the decade. Becomes a good pinch hitter, draws a lot of walks. All right, now we're down to 4 tokens, and Seattle is passed again because we already know they passed. Dodgers needed to add a guy in 82 to take the spot that Dave Stewart used to be in. And how cool is this? After a year away from LA, he went to the Giants in 82. No, he didn't. Reggie Smith. He's actually going to finish his career in LA as the DH. He used to be a 2-3 E2 in right field in 80. Now he can only play first base poorly, but he'll be a DH only versus right-handed pitching for the Dodgers. Next up, we have Vegas. And this is Vegas's first move. They're going to do the double switch with two of their outfielders. Mark Brewhart in an 81 card. Now he moves into an 82 card, which really has some significant power versus left-handed pitching with homers on 5 and 6. That's what they need in a platoon. They need him to crush home runs. And the player they'll get into 81, you'll eventually see, will be Al Bunbury. But we'll keep going. So Boston, Minnesota passed earlier. They pass again. And now the Mets, they've passed after adding Rusty Staub to their team. The Pirates. This is the next move the Pirates made. Step 1 was Lee Brandt. Step 2, this is a really good move. Let me page up to see at 8204 what were they replacing. Johnny Ray. So Johnny Ray moved into his 84 card, vacating his 82 card. That works perfectly because for the 82, Gary Gaetti was still available. The Twins had not made a move to sign Gary Gaetti because they still had John Castino and Mickey Hatcher at second and third. So 23-year-old Gary Gaetti gets signed to the Pirates. That could be a nice little futures move. Did play a full season, 565 plate appearances, 25 homers, but he hits .230. But he's still an everyday player, and that's something the Pirates need as they try and rebuild their team. All right, Colorado passes after adding Stan Pappy earlier. Texas, this is the second part of their deal with Dave Henderson and Mickey Rivers switching years. Dave Henderson goes to a 280 card now. Florida passed earlier, they pass again. Baltimore now passes after adding Rick Cerrone, and the Padres also pass. So now we're going to start seeing more. The Expos and Atlanta passed. We knew that. Toronto makes another move, and they're going to make another one after this. So this is going to get interesting. Temporarily, they really needed a third baseman who could field, possibly hit left-handed pitching. They found Ken Reitz because he's a 2 third baseman. Love the defense, but he's only a 215 hitter. So we'll see how long they hold on to him. And that doesn't mean you're done. If a pretty girl comes down the street, you'll find someone more attractive to pick up, and that's what Toronto's going to do. All right, next up. First time we heard from Arizona at 8203. This is the Ryan Sandberg deal, right? I believe Sandberg getting out of 82 and going into the 84 card. Yeah, that's what it is. So they had a spot in Sandberg's old card. They needed a DH versus lefties, and sometimes it just works out perfectly, folks. They found a DH versus lefties. A guy doesn't have a position, Mike Ivey, but he really slugs it against lefties. Perfect fit for Arizona. All right, we now hearing from Kansas City for the first time, and they pass. And now the California Angels, they pass. And the Milwaukee Brewers pass. So that's 3 teams who've spent tokens. You see they're under 5. And they all pass. Joining the previous list of Giants, Yankees, Cleveland, Portland, all passing. So that brings us back to the Cincinnati Reds. They added Bruce Brenny earlier, and they're going to make another deal here. They had Mike Squires in an 83 card, but they looked closely and said he hits 222. All they wanted is that great defense, but in the year of 82, he actually can steal some bases and at 265. So he becomes more roster ready. He'll play a lot more with that card than the 222 card of 83. So Mike Squires gets a replacement. Excuse me, the 81 card, actually. 2 years prior. Even better. Oakland passes after the one guy they added earlier. Houston continues to make moves. This is the counterpart of the Jose Cruz deal. Cruz goes from 83 to 84. Frank DePino goes to 84 to 83. And why is that? Well, DePino's 84 card, he had a 3.35 ERA. This card, it's a 2.65 ERA, and it really dominates versus lefties. Much better suited to set up Dave Smith and Sam Beto. So now Houston's bullpen's lights out. Philadelphia's on the clock. This would be their first move. They're going to do a double switch. They had Harry Spillman's 84 card, decided to go back to an 82 card, as his slugging is up to, his OPS, excuse me, he's up to 792. And he'll be behind the plate with Steve Yeager. Ohio players pass. Now we do a reset down to 3 tokens. We're in the 3 token list. You're going to start seeing a lot of passes from teams we've seen before. St. Louis passes. Seattle passes. The Dodgers pass. And now we have Vegas on the clock. Vegas, this is part 2 of the swapping of Mark Bruhard. Al Bumbry was in an 82 card where his defense was pretty bad. We get him back to his 81 card where he's hitting 273. He's a 2 in left field and a 3 in center. But at least it's much better than a 4. So Bumbry, 81 card to Vegas. Boston passed and Minnesota passed. We knew that. The Mets passed. Pittsburgh, still making moves. Great story. They drafted Von Hayes with his 81 card, and now they're improving it to his 82 card. Think about that. He just went through an entire rookie season without playing a game. He goes from 81 immediately to 82. His last year in Cleveland, by the way, before he gets traded to the Phillies. And it's a pretty nice year defensively. He's a 2 in the outfield, a -1 arm. That's what they like, along with his speed. Average isn't there yet. It's coming. Colorado passes. Texas Rangers pass. Now that the Mickey Rivers, Dave Henderson swap is complete. Marlins have passed all along. And now, of course, Baltimore and San Diego and the Expos have passed. We get a new team, the White Sox. First time you've heard from them because they've also spent a lot of money in the draft. 8103, is that a... Oh, this is actually a cut. So 8103 for the White Sox was Lamar Johnson. And they decided to release Lamar Johnson. They didn't really need his offense anymore. And they wanted another player from the year of 81. And they found a guy who was on the keeper list but wasn't kept, and that is Steve Trout. Padres had the rights to Steve Trout, but they didn't want him. And so the White Sox jumped in, and they got him from the Padres for a token. Steve Trout, 81 card, very good, much better as a reliever than a starter, because you can face more lefties that way. Or you'll get a higher percentage of lefties, and Trout dominates left-handed batters. So that should bode well for the White Sox, having him in a relief role. As we know, they have Floyd Bannister and Britt Burns in the starting roles. All right, next up, Atlanta passed earlier. Toronto still making moves. They added Ken Reitz, but Dave McKay was on Cincinnati, and Cincinnati cut, to get Mike Squires into his 81 card, they cut Dave McKay. And so the Blue Jays, after signing Ken Reitz in 81, said, oh, wait a minute, isn't Dave McKay a little bit better than Ken Reitz? Well, by batting average he is. He's a 263 hitter. Reitz was only a 215 hitter. And McKay also hits righties very well. So that's why Toronto made the move. They were nervous about the lack of offense with Kenny Reitz here, but they seem to be comfortable with the offense of Dave McKay, who also was a one-time Toronto Blue Jay. McKay played for the Blue Jays late 70s. He's with Oakland in 1981. All right, next up, Arizona. Another move they had to make. 8106 for Arizona. Let's see. Oh, they had Randy Martz on their team, but he was a relief starter with a 3.68 ERA. They really needed a starter, not a starter. They needed a starter 6 or better. And Doug Bird was out there with his 81 card, pretty nice card, 3.58 ERA, a 1.2 WHIP. Nice year, the last good year for Doug Bird in baseball. And he'll be able to start where Randy Martz would have been more of a relief starter. Next up, Kansas City passes. The Cubs are finally on the clock. They spent a lot of money. They only have 3 tokens, but they passed. They're happy with their team. They don't need to. They sat through 86 selections, and then when it came to their time, they just said, "Thanks, guys. It was fun. We'll see you later." All right, California. We know California, Milwaukee. That's right. And then Giants, and then Yankees, then Cleveland, then Portland. They all pass. Cincinnati's still making moves. This is a team that runners up, #1 seed a year ago, runners up in the league championship series, or no, they got bounced in the first round of the playoffs, and they actually are the favorite for 1981. They had the best record in baseball in the strike year, didn't go to the playoffs, and so they're making these extra moves, micromanaging a little bit, tweaking Mike Squires and so forth. They needed a utility infielder to take the Squires spot from 83. So 81 Squires is on the team, and then 83, the utility infielder is Kelly Paris. Cincinnati Red, nice on base percentage, can play all infield positions, very versatile. And that's some smart moves by the Reds. Portland, they're already passed. Oakland passes. Houston's still making moves. They're going to do another double switch. They want somebody in the year of 82 that Joe Niekro occupied. They said, "Hey, Joe, can we put you back on an 81 card?" And he goes, "Sure, I'm fine." So the 81 card Niekro has is a 2.82 ERA and a 1.20 WHIP. So Niekro, it's always nice to have some players who have consistent seasons year in and year out, because they make good candidates to move up and back into the different years. Philadelphia, this is the second part of the double switch with Harry Spillman. So Spillman was in an 84 card. He goes to 82. They drafted Concepcion with his 82 card. He was like a 220 hitter, but by 1984, Concepcion's hitting 282 for Kansas City. Onyx Concepcion to the Phillies. Then the Ohio players pass. So now we're going to go into the 2 tokens left. Only 2 tokens left for teams. Beginning, of course, with St. Louis. We should see a big chunk of passes now. We can almost, as it scrolls over 32 times, there's only going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 or 6 teams still with an option to select. So St. Louis, the Dodgers, Vegas. You notice Seattle's not even here anymore. Once you've passed like 2 or 3 times, it just deletes you altogether. So it's just St. Louis, the Dodgers, Vegas, Boston, Minnesota, the Mets. The Pirates continue to make moves. They had the rights to Eddie Solomon, but did not exercise those rights, as after adding Jim Bibby in that same year, they found Jose De Leon. Well, as it turns out, they needed a reliever, and that's what they're going to do with Eddie Solomon. So, no, he won't be a starter for them, but he's a starter relief. 22 games, 17 starts, but they're going to put him in the bullpen, along with Charlie Leibrandt. They have Tekulve closing games. They have Candelaria and Rodin and Jose De Leon. So they're trying to put it together, folks. They're trying to get more competent, the Pirates. This is a dark time for them, as the Reds and Cardinals are expected to compete for that division. All right, Colorado passes. We know Texas passed, and then we're going to see, I guess, Florida. Yep, Florida, Baltimore, San Diego, the Expos. White Sox. They needed to add a player for 82. This is when they improved Harold Baines. So 8203 was Harold Baines. They moved him to 84. So in the old Baines spot, they needed defense somewhere on this team. They found defense at third base behind Garth Orge, and that's Aurelio Rodriguez, the original A-Rod. He's 34. He's still a 2 at third base. And look, he played for the White Sox. Another match. Drafting a guy or signing a guy in UDFA who actually played for you. Next up, Atlanta and Toronto with passes. I think this is Toronto's first pass, right? Yeah, after swapping the third baseman, Toronto finally feels they have what they need. Arizona, after adding Doug Bird and the guy before him, which was Mike Ivy. Mike Ivy, Doug Bird, Arizona's done. We're happy with our team. Kansas City passes. We know the Cubs just passed. Then you have California, Milwaukee, San Francisco, the Yankees, Cleveland, Portland. Now Cincinnati added that consecutive list of passes. Plus you have this nice chunk of numbers here. 17, 18, 19, 20, 1, 2, you see. All consecutive passing. Oakland passes. And our boys, Houston, they're not giving up. They are not giving up. They are continuing to make moves. We talked about Joe Niekro moving out of 82 back to 81. And the reason was the list of remaining left-handed pitchers available in 81 was really bad. Houston, last year, their number 3 starter was really bad. It was Rick Wortham with a 5.97 ERA. And Houston made it all the way to the League Championship Series anyway by basically limiting him to a spot start 5 innings. Well, they got a little bit better. In that 3 spot, they signed Dave LaPointe. Basically ignored by the Cardinals and much of the rest of the National League to this point. LaPointe starts in the World Series for the 1982 St. Louis Cardinals. He's got a 3.42 ERA and 152 and 2/3 innings. The whip's kind of high. I think it's like 145. Yep, pretty high. Never really got much better than that either, I might add. But hey, Astros, it's an improvement for them. Left-handed starting pitching is an incredible weakness compared to the righty starters. Don Sutton, they just signed as a free agent. Nolan Ryan and Joe Niekro. But they can hide LaPointe in that rotation. Philadelphia, did they pass before? They were adding Onyx Concepcion. They're done, yeah. After swapping out Harry Spillman and Onyx Concepcion, the Phillies pass. So that means Ohio passes. And now we're going to go through this one more time. And you're going to see a surprise here, folks. I know I talked about the passes, but let's keep going. Back at St. Louis. St. Louis, the Dodgers. These are all passes. Vegas, Boston, Minnesota. I've done it every time. The Mets. Seattle did a trade, and they passed. Here's a new team. It's the Detroit Tigers. And why are we hearing from the Detroit Tigers? Because they didn't have any money, remember? They only had 1 token. They made a deal with Seattle. Got another token. But basically, they're the only team here. I mean, everybody else has cleared the joint and left. They're staying the last call. Keep the lights on for the Tigers. They still got to fill out their roster. So they made multiple moves. The first move was that they wanted to vacate the 82 Ronald Floor and move him into the 81 season. And the reason is he's a double-A stealer in the 81 season. That's why they decided to do that. And in that division, you've got Gary Carter and Tony Pena with -3 arms. Detroit wants to at least put a little bit of pressure on that team, force them to start those guys and maybe steal a base, possibly. But yeah, you want to try at least with a double-A stealer. Ronald Floor, plus it gets him off the roster sooner. Instead of playing all the way to 82, he can just play one more year in 81 for the Tigers. Next up, the Pirates. Still adding guys. They needed a infielder, any position, didn't really matter, versus left-handed pitching. They found, it's really funny, they found another double-A stealer, Rodney Scott. Double-A stealers, back-to-back picks. But Scott also happens to be a 2 at second base, so he can be defense for Johnny Ray. Not that he needs it. But Detroit and Pittsburgh make moves. Then we're going to have passes. Yeah, everybody's going to pass in this round, and I think we only have one more pick left. Houston, by the way. Houston finally passes as we get to the end of the one token moments in undrafted free agency. So then we go to Ohio, and then it's going to be 0 with St. Louis. This is basically no money. This is you got no money, but we're continuing because the league isn't whole. So now everybody should be passing except for, the Detroit Tigers. They needed a middle infielder who could hit lefties better than righties. They took the old 8203 Ron LaFleur card that he vacated to get into the 8104 card. And they took 82 Jimmy Sexton, another speedy guy. So interesting to see all this speed late in undrafted free agency. All the power's gone, all the defense is gone. Teams are looking, maybe it's speed. Maybe that's what we should do. So Jimmy Sexton's an ace stealer, hits lefties much better than righties. He'll back up Barry Evans, Alan Trammell, and Lou Whitaker in Detroit on a World Series contender. And that should, hopefully, be, dare I say, the end of undrafted free agency, folks. As we go down the list, we can see the numbers going down there to 32. And there it is. And I even had room for negative money in case somebody wanted to. But that'll do it. That's undrafted free agency. The token round of the draft. Now all the teams have the proper number of players. And we are ready to play baseball. So stick around. The Fall League will be getting underway. I appreciate you checking this video out. We'll see you next time.